This is The Curious Gamer, a show about the culture, design, and joy of games. I'm Devin Pulaski. This holiday season, two brand new game consoles are getting a ton of buzz, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X and S. But these consoles are extremely hard to find. And while they're both fantastic pieces of technology, I'd argue the best game console you can get right now is not the latest console, but one that's over 3 years old. It's also one that isn't nearly as powerful as a PlayStation or an Xbox, but likewise is less expensive and way easier to find. And that console is the Nintendo Switch. Most of you have probably heard of it, and many of you have likely played with one. The Switch is great, both for people who have obsessively played games for decades, like me, as well as for people who are not very experienced with games and are curious to learn more. Since it's the holiday season, a lot of people are buying Switches as gifts, or maybe you just received one, or maybe you're looking for new titles to play with friends and family. Regardless of how, if a Nintendo Switch is entering your life in some way or another, I've curated a list of titles that I think should be in everyone's library. Now, if you're a core gamer, this list might seem pretty obvious and basic. But if this is you, I have a special request. Please share this episode with your non-gaming friends and family. That's who I'm trying to reach with this whole podcast thing after all. Because the thing is, I'm still so surprised by how many groups of people can have such blind spots to video game franchises that I take for granted. For example, just a few weeks ago I was talking to someone in their early 30s and I mentioned the Nintendo Switch, and they said they had never heard of it. And not long before that, I also spoke to another pretty tech and culture savvy person, and I mentioned The Legend of Zelda to them. They thought I was talking about the original Zelda from the 80s. And I told them I was referring to a recent title within the last few years. They were genuinely baffled that there had been dozens of Zelda games made since the original. And likewise, I was equally baffled that they were clueless to this fact. And this isn't some obscure franchise. This is one of Nintendo's main franchises. Nintendo, makers of arguably the longest-running, best-selling, mass-marketed video game franchises ever. And if this many people are clueless about Nintendo games, I can only imagine how little most people know about the other treasures of video games. There is still a deep cultural rift between people who play games and people who don't, which is why, in my very small, simple way, I'd like to build bridges between these worlds. And perhaps one of those ways is to simply share a list of games that I think most people would enjoy. Before I begin, here's one last quick note. Most of the titles I'm recommending are exclusive to the Nintendo Switch, but many of them can be played on several other platforms, like a PlayStation or Xbox, or even your phone or on PC or Mac. As always, if you're looking for something interesting to play, no matter what you have access to, I'm happy to lend a recommendation. So reach out to me using the contact form on thecuriousgamer.org. All right, let's get started. So I just noted how there are many people who don't even know what a Switch is, so let's quickly go over the hardware. The Switch is Nintendo's latest game console, released in March of 2017. The console sits inside a dock that connects to your TV, where you play it with a controller, like any other traditional console. But the magic happens when you undock the console. The Switch has a built-in screen, as well as two little controllers that attach to the sides, meaning you can play games on the go in handheld mode. This is a huge deal, as it's the only console that's ever had this kind of capability. Several years later, it's still a small thrill to me whenever I'm playing my Switch on the go and then I drop it into its dock, where I can immediately resume playing on my TV. Now, it's true that the Switch might not have quite as much graphical or computational power as other modern consoles. But Nintendo has always been a master at delivering an incredible experience without needing the latest and greatest hardware. Nintendo later released a version of the Switch called the Switch Lite. It's pretty much the same as a regular Switch, except it's $100 cheaper. The main catch is that you can't dock the console and play it on a TV. You play games entirely in handheld mode. But you can still play every game on a Switch Lite that you can on a Switch. This makes it a good option for if you have kids and want to get multiple Switches without breaking your bank account. For 3.5 years, Nintendo's small but mighty machine has taken the world by storm, selling about 70 million units at the time of this episode. I've combed through the Switch's entire history, and I'm here to deliver my list of essential titles for Nintendo's latest console. Number 1. Animal Crossing: New Horizons. In 2020, I played about 115 different video games, and I can say, without a moment's hesitation, that Animal Crossing: New Horizons is my very favorite out of any game I've played this year. So I'll spend more time on this than any other on the list. New Horizons is the 5th main Animal Crossing title, and carries on many of the same traditions of the series. You create an avatar and move to a deserted island that is slowly cultivated by you and various animal residents. You build a house. You make friends with your quirky, charming, and often hilarious neighbors. You catch fish and bugs. You collect furniture. You discover fossils to fill a museum. In general, you go on to shape and style the island however you see fit. Time passes in the game world the same as it does in yours, and even the seasons change based on your location. The villagers and local plants and creatures all evolve based on their unique schedules, and there are new seasonal events and items added almost every month. Everyone's island experience is unique, and the islands feel like living, breathing organisms. Every time I peek in on my own island, I feel like I discover something new. You can play Animal Crossing entirely with a friend, and you and groups of people can visit anyone else's island. This adds weight and value to every decision you make, since you want to make your island as full as your personality as possible for friends and family to see. The thing is, there are many games out there that have robust, ever-changing content like Animal Crossing. And there are even games that have similar qualities. Most commonly, the popular series The Sims comes up as a comparison. And while Animal Crossing is immensely popular, there are many people, especially longtime gamers, who wrongly assume that the game would fail to hold their interest, that it's too cutesy, or that it lacks serious depth. I strongly argue against this. There's an elusive quality that makes Animal Crossing one of 2020's most popular and best-selling games. Every molecule of this game has been seen to with loving care and unparalleled craftsmanship. But this is hard to write in a review or to watch secondhand. You really have to experience it yourself to understand. You can hear it in the sound design of the beach and how the sound your footsteps make from the sand is based on what type of shoes you're wearing. You can see it in the lovingly animated creatures that appear in the museum as you donate them. You can feel it when you finally finish crafting a masterpiece to display on that once empty corner of your island, and see the smiles it brings to your friends' faces when they visit. Finally, you can understand it best when the game envelops you in feelings of calm, of satisfaction, and of peace, as all of its individual elements relax your senses. A quality all the more important during the year of the pandemic. Games are often frantic, or chaotic, or violent, or things that are sometimes anything but relaxing, which is what makes Animal Crossing so special, that it is so engaging while at once being so peaceful. There's really nothing else quite like it, and an essential experience for your Nintendo Switch. Number 2. Puyo Puyo Tetris. I can personally guarantee that this game, more than any other on the Switch or possibly any other game period, is more likely to get everyone in the room playing together at the same time. From grandparents that normally sit on the sidelines, to aunts and uncles who usually say that they would rather just watch, to millennials who maybe used to play Mario or Sonic when they were 8 years old and haven't touched games since, to kids who are just learning about Tetris for the first time, and anyone in between. This game combines Tetris and Puyo Puyo, another falling block style game that's popular in Japan. Up to 4 people can play this game on the same screen or play online, and you can mix and match a huge variety of game modes. For example, 3 people in your group might want to just play Tetris by itself, while the 4th person might find Puyo Puyo to be easier, so the game will balance the scoring accordingly. Or you can play a mode where every few minutes it switches back and forth from a Tetris board to a Puyo Puyo board. The list goes on with even more creative and chaotic modes. I will say, the game's aesthetic at first might be extremely off-putting to some, with over-the-top cutesy characters and annoyingly grating voices. But I promise that this eventually becomes part of the appeal. You sort of learn to just embrace the game's flamboyance and go along for the ride. Before long, everyone gets hooked on this game, and once a round is over, everyone pushes the restart button again and again and again until you look up and realize it's 1 a.m. My wife and I enjoy playing this game together so much that right before our son was born, I brought the Switch to the hospital so we could play Puyo Puyo Tetris while we were waiting around. I'm pretty sure it was the first time the nurses were asked if there was a way to get the Nintendo Switch's sound to be playing over the hospital room's TV speakers. Game number 3, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I mean, it's Mario Kart. Everybody knows Mario Kart. Every Mario Kart since its debut in 1992 has been great. But Mario Kart 8 is the best Mario Kart ever made. Not only does it have the most tracks and characters of any in the series, but the game design and the feel of driving is more refined and enjoyable than ever. It doesn't hurt that the game is perhaps one of the best looking Nintendo has ever made, which I don't say lightly. Get a room full of people or jump online and have a blast racing and laughing long into the night. Number 4, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I've enjoyed popular multiplayer games like the Mario Kart series since their beginnings in the 90s, but I don't think I'll ever enjoy a multiplayer experience more than Super Smash Bros. Smash Bros. Is a fighting game with characters from almost every Nintendo franchise, and even many non-Nintendo characters, like Sonic the Hedgehog, Pac-Man, Mega Man, Solid Snake from Metal Gear Solid, Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, even Steve from Minecraft. And the latest entry in the series on the Switch, Smash Ultimate, is becoming impossibly immense as time goes on, with 86 characters available now and still more to come. You would think a game like this is a mess, that it's just cashing in on the nostalgia and popularity of each of its featured characters. But this is not some lazily thrown together gaming melting pot. Every single character in this game, their moves, their animations, the stages, the props and items, the musical arrangements, everything is seen to with extreme admiration to the source material while also nearly perfectly balancing them into the game's broader context. The fact that this game exists at all is a miracle, but the fact that it's one of the most fun fighting games with a rich, complex, and rewarding skill ceiling is something else entirely. This is not just an incredible game by itself. It is an incredible homage to all of video games. Now I will say, this game might not be nearly as easy to pick up and play as something like Mario Kart, but if you stick with Smash Bros., and find others to play it with you who will do the same, then you are in for a treat that will last you a lifetime of gaming. Something that will instantly bond you to others who also play the game, of which there are many. And I say this as someone who, throughout most of my life, has played the Smash Bros. Series for hundreds of hours, happily shouting and laughing alongside friends, co-workers, and family. Game number 5, Rocket League. This is a game for sports fans out there, but if you've never heard of it, it might not seem like a sports game at first glance. I talked about this game in my recent episode titled Parents Who Play, but if you missed that one, in Rocket League you're basically playing soccer. But instead of people, you play as a little remote-controlled looking car that drives around the field. You and the other cars are trying to crash into a huge ball to knock into the other team's net. It may sound pretty silly, but anyone who's actually played it can tell you that it's super simple to pick up, but unfathomably deep and difficult to master. Best of all, Rocket League is now completely free. And you can play online with other people, including people who are playing on a completely different console than a Switch, such as an Xbox or PlayStation or PC. It's extremely rare when a game does this, so I encourage you to reach out to other friends to play together. Number 6, Yoshi's Woolly World and Kirby's Star Allies. I'm putting these two together because they share a lot in common. They're both great games for kids, they each star some of Nintendo's most beloved characters, and they are both side-scrolling platformers. What's great about Yoshi's Woolly World is that the entire game world and its characters are made out of yarn, paper, fabric, buttons, beads, and all other manner of arts and crafts, and it's an incredibly creative aesthetic. As for Kirby Star Allies, it's not only a great time capsule for the Kirby series, but up to 4 players can play through the entire game cooperatively. You can also do this in Yoshi, except it's only with 2 players. Everyone can play and work together to get through each level, making these great for parents wanting to introduce games to their kids and to do something cooperative. But don't let a lack of kids stop you from enjoying these titles, as they're just as satisfying for adults of any age. Number 7, Untitled Goose Game. This game got a ton of social media buzz when it was released in September of 2019, and that's because it has one of the greatest elevator pitches in all of video games. You play as a goose, and your goal is to be a complete jerk to a small British town. The game is hilarious, and it's also short and sweet. I'd say you could finish it in 1 to 3 play sessions. Like many games on my list, Untitled Goose Game can also be played entirely with another person. And a quick reminder, you can buy almost every game on my list in stores, but Untitled Goose Game is from an independent developer, so it's much easier and also less expensive to download this game digitally from Nintendo's online store called the eShop, which you can access at any time from your Switch's main menu. Number 8, Pokémon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. I'm dedicating one of the next big episodes of The Curious Gamer to the Pokémon series and illustrate why it's the most popular media franchise in the entire world, and why it's an essential experience that no one should miss, especially children. But as for Pokémon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, well, these games are a remix of my all-time favorite game, Pokémon Red and Blue, originally released in 1996 for the Game Boy. These modern remakes are the perfect starter game for anyone new to the Pokémon series, or for those of you who grew up with the original Game Boy games. You'll get a thrill out of seeing the world and Pokémon in the Kanto region, modernized with expressive 3D graphics, and the beloved original soundtrack played with a new orchestral arrangement. The main difference between each version of the game is that you either get a Pikachu as your little buddy in Let's Go Pikachu, and an Eevee in Let's Go Eevee, who happens to be my personal favorite Pokemon. Your little buddy is infectiously charming. They'll ride on your shoulder, you can pet them and feed them treats, you can dress them up in stupid outfits, and they also happen to be really strong Pokémon to have on your team. These games also introduce new features that are similar to Pokémon Go, which makes it far easier and honestly more fun to catch Pokémon than it was back on the Game Boy. And fun fact, after almost 25 years, this is the first Pokémon game where I actually did indeed catch them all. The latest, most modern generation in the Pokémon series is also available on the Switch, and it's called Pokémon Sword and Shield. And while I enjoy those games, I would argue Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee are better titles for beginners, and feature only the original 151 Pokémon, as opposed to Sword and Shield, which has the majority of the 893 Pokémon that exist. Number 9. Stardew Valley. This is another indie game on my list, and indie games are usually made by a small studio that has a few dozen to only a handful of people. But this game, well, it was made almost entirely by a single person. But you never would guess that when you realize that it has enough meaningful gameplay that has compelled millions of people, on average, to sink around, I'm guessing 50 to 100 hours into this game, if not several hundred more. In Stardew Valley, you play someone who escapes their soul-crushing office job and decides to become a farmer in a small town. How you run your farm is entirely up to you. You might focus all your energy on growing seasonal crops, or you might invest more in chickens and cows, or you might be interested in hunting down treasures and monsters in a nearby cave. The game pays homage to the Super Nintendo era series called Harvest Moon, but it goes above and beyond to modernize and perfect the farm-based gameplay into an experience far exceeding any other farming game that exists. Central to the experience is the town and the relationships you make with the locals. You can even get married to certain people, as well as work to restore parts of the town to their former glory. But the characters really grow on you if you spend the time to get to know them. Some people compare this game to Animal Crossing, but I'd argue it has far more tangible goals and rewards by comparison. It also just has its own unique brand of relaxing gameplay. There's something extremely zen and meditative as you work your crops, harvest vegetables, water saplings, feed your chickens, and check in on the townspeople. There are few games filled with as much joy and heart as Stardew Valley. Number 10. Sonic Mania. If you listen to the first episode of my show, you know why this is a personal favorite of mine. Sonic Mania is a loving tribute to the 90s era gameplay of the Sonic the Hedgehog series. It features remixed versions of classic levels from past Sonic games, as well as brand new stages. The 2D pixel art is bursting with personality, and the soundtrack is filled with bop after bop. Like seriously, the music is so good I bought the soundtrack on vinyl, and now my 2-year-old son likes it so much that he brings me the disc to play every single day. Not every Sonic the Hedgehog game is as polished as, say, the Super Mario Bros. Series, and you could argue there are far more misses than hits. But Sonic Mania is an inarguably delightful treat, full of the blazing speed and delightful sights and sounds that keep Sonic a continued staple in mainstream culture, all these years later. Number 11. Mario Odyssey.
Here we go, off the rails. Don't you know it's time to raise our sails? It's freedom like you never knew.
Just like with Mario Kart, I don't need to talk much about Mario Odyssey. It's Mario. Every Mario game since the first Mario games in the 80s has been great. But Mario Odyssey might be the best 3D Mario ever made.
Wacky world, jump with me, grab coins with me, oh yeah! It's time to jump up in the air.
In Odyssey, like most Mario games, Mario travels to various gorgeous and extremely creative worlds, running and jumping through obstacles to collect things. And this time he has a magic hat that allows him to transform into an unexpectedly huge number of creatures and objects, which is always a delight to discover and experiment with. Nintendo somehow manages to make every main Mario game a masterpiece of game design that most of the industry studies, and an essential experience that is not to be missed.
So let's do the Odyssey. Odyssey, yes.
Number 12. Luigi's Mansion 3. Speaking of Mario, let's talk about his brother, Luigi. Since 2001, Luigi's Mansion games have been all about putting Luigi into Halloween-like situations, where he has to suck up ghosts with a vacuum straight out of Ghostbusters. But this third game throws Luigi into a lavish Art Deco hotel. The game has extremely clever puzzles and some of the most detailed environments and expressively animated characters of any Nintendo game. I've talked a lot about how most games on this list can be played cooperatively, and the same is true in Luigi's Mansion. But I would argue this is easily the most cooperative game on my list, requiring far more actual cooperation and strategic thinking between your partner. Often you'll take turns having these aha moments, leading to satisfying teamwork and puzzle solving. Number 13. Ring Fit Adventure. Ring Fit Adventure is an exercise game, and perhaps the very first exercise game that not only gives you a good workout, but also is just a fun game in its own right. When you buy Ring Fit Adventure, it comes with a ring in the box. It's essentially a large plastic Pilates ring, and there's also a leg strap. You attach the Nintendo Switch Joy-Con controllers into the ring and strap so that the game is able to track your movements as well as give you feedback on your exercise. The ring is represented in the game as a character with a voice, and together the two of you are traveling through a colorful world trying to restore the ring's powers, and you're also trying to fight off little monsters as well as an evil, extremely buff dragon. A lot of people are skeptical by exercise games because, well, they don't seem to give you a proper workout. For example, the immensely popular Wii Fit had some great ideas, but it was hard to actually work up a sweat in the game. That's not the case in Ring Fit Adventure, which has been praised by many personal trainers for its ability to provide a rigorous exercise experience. The ring has a ton of resistance, so you can actually use it for strength training, and the motion sensors feel extremely accurate representing in the game world what you're actually doing in the real world. But for me, the most ingenious part of the game's design is the feedback. Let's say I'm fighting a pack of little monsters, and I need to squeeze the ring as hard as I can to attack. The game will show me if I'm applying enough strength, or if I'm being lazy and slacking off. Having that constant and immediate feedback makes it much harder to cheat. As a result, when I'm done playing, I feel way more exhausted, but in a good way. I mean, that's the whole point after all. Maybe Ring Fit Adventure can't 100% recreate the experience of going to the gym, but it can come pretty darn close, especially considering we're in the middle of a pandemic, and also many of us are currently in the depths of a cold winter. So, I say, give Ring Fit Adventure a try, and you'll likely be surprised and charmed by the number of ways exercise has been turned into a fun game. Alright, so before I get to the final game on my list, I want to point out a broad category for the next item: Nintendo Switch Online. So, if you want to play Switch games with people over the internet, you need to subscribe to a service called Nintendo Switch Online. This service costs money, but thankfully it's less expensive than the online services for PlayStation and Xbox. And you can save a ton by enrolling in a family plan and splitting the cost between friends and family. Subscribing to Nintendo Switch Online gives you more than just access to online multiplayer. You get instant Netflix-style access to a library of retro Nintendo games from the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Super Nintendo. These are classics from the 80s and 90s that continue to define game design as we know it. Games like Super Mario Bros. 3, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, Castlevania, Super Metroid, Kirby's Adventure, Donkey Kong Country, Earthbound, Yoshi's Island, and dozens more. These are some of the best games of all time, and worth checking out regardless of if you grew up with them or not. On top of that, there are a few other games you get for free by subscribing to Nintendo Online. The best of the bunch is easily Tetris 99. I know it's another Tetris game, but this one has a unique twist. You play against 99 other people at the same time in an attempt to be the last one standing. More free games and features are being added to Nintendo Switch Online, and it's safe to say this is an essential purchase for your Switch. Alright folks, I've saved the best for last. I know I said Animal Crossing was my favorite game of this year, and Pokémon Let's Go Eevee is one of my favorite games ever, but The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild might be the single greatest game made to date. I completed Breath of the Wild in its entirety when I first got my Switch, and my wife did the same. A few months later, my Switch was stolen, but when I eventually recovered a new copy, I completed Breath of the Wild a second time. No other game has delighted me so much that I was willing to witness all of it 3 entire times in the course of a single year. The best way to sum up the importance of this game is what happens within the first few minutes of starting it. You begin in a dark cave and walk outside to the edge of a cliff. The soundtrack swells as the vast game world called Hyrule stretches before you. I get chills to this day thinking about this moment. I'd been playing hundreds of games for decades before this game, and yet Breath of the Wild made me feel like I was a kid again, feeling a childlike sense of wonder and adventure, almost like I was experiencing video games for the first time again. Breath of the Wild takes what has always been great about the Zelda series, the exploration, the captivating world and lore, the swords and magic and temples and dungeons. Well, it takes these things and rethinks all of them for the modern age. Rather than guiding you from point A to B like recent titles have, this game instead opens itself up, inviting you to go wherever you'd like, in whatever order you'd like, to climb any mountain or surface you see, to discover rich, exciting rewards within every nook and cranny. It is also a game that asks you to revel in the majesty of nature. To bask in an ocean of tall grass as it flows in a gentle breeze. To enjoy the flowers and crops in a small rural town. To observe a school of fish in a nearby stream or a pack of wild horses on the countryside. To feel the bracing sting of cold on a snowy mountaintop. Many video games can feel like they're dragging you away from the natural world. But I'd argue that Zelda: Breath of the Wild is a game that acknowledges there is no substituting nature. But what it offers in nature's place is perhaps the best virtual approximation of it. I think deciding what game we're going to play hinges on whether it's a world we want to spend meaningful time in, how much this place is going to excite us, how many interesting choices it's going to give us, the kinds of interesting ways we can solve problems. Perhaps, most importantly, how much it'll linger on in our minds after we stop playing, and how those memories rekindle feelings of joy, wonder, and meaning. There is no perfect game, nor is there one that appeals to everyone. But I would wager there are few games as special or as thoughtfully composed as The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. And that is why it is my highest recommended title on this list. The Curious Gamer is written, produced, and voiced by me, Devin Pulaski. I also composed the original music for my show, while all the other music in this episode came from the titles in my list. So, there are way more games I think everyone should play that I didn't get a chance to list off in this episode. So, if you're still looking for something, I'm putting a big extra list in my show notes. And again, if you're looking for something to play that's not on the Nintendo Switch, reach out to me on my website and I'll be happy to make a recommendation. Please hit the subscribe button for my show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can watch and listen to my show on YouTube and Instagram. So it really helps the show out if you could leave a 5-star review or share the show with a friend who you think would be interested. You can do this and learn more about the show at thecuriousgamer.org. This might be my last episode for the year. For those of you who have listened so far, thank you for sticking with me. And I hope that I've offered something meaningful to listen to these past 10 episodes. And I can't wait to share even more stories about the culture, design, and joy of this wonderful medium in 2021. No matter what you celebrate at this time of year, or don't celebrate, I hope that your final days of 2020 are safe, happy, and hopeful. Thank you for listening. And remember this, no matter what you're doing, whether you're feeling up or down, you're never too old to enjoy your life and play.